Hello, in this video I want to share with you my list of top 5 most bizarre facts about the Islamic history. So let us start with a spicy and a controversial subject. Why is it that the Islamic jihadis and fundamentalists hate the West? Well, partially it is true that they hate the West because the West is free, as many American politicians used to say on television. Osama bin Laden hates the fact that there is apostasy and gay rights and female rights in the West. He also hates the fact that alcohol and fornication are legal in the West. But there are some other more, let's say, reasonable factors that make the Islamic fundamentalists hate the West. And two of the primary reasons for hatred of the West, other than what I already mentioned for Osama bin Laden, were the presence of American military in Muslim countries, in Muslim majority countries, and the existence of Israel, or to be more precise, the fact that American foreign policy helps the existence of Israel and kind of finances and equips Israel with military equipment that Israel needs in order to continue to hold the Palestinian territories. But it wasn't always the American foreign policy to help Israel. Try and guess, when did the Americans help Israel militarily for the first time? When did they provide Israel with military aid for the first time? The answer is 1962. And that is quite a lot after the formation of Israel. So after the British Empire collapsed in the Middle East, it left a state to the Jews. But the British were unable to resolve the ethnic and religious conflict that existed between the Jews and the Palestinians, and therefore immediately after Israel proclaimed its independence from the British Empire, there was a war with the Arab states. The Arab states saw Israel as illegitimate, and therefore they tried to wipe out Israel from the map of the world. And so the question arises kind of naturally: how did a small state like Israel manage to defend itself from its huge and hostile neighbors? Especially because at the time they received no military assistance from the West. As I already said, until 1962 the West provided Israel with zero military help. Well, the answer is this guy, actually, yeah. Joseph Stalin decided to help Israel while he was persecuting the Jews in the Soviet Union. And what's the reason for that? Well, Stalin was a evil genius, one could say, and he realized that in the long run that the United States will sooner or later start helping Israel. And he also realized that that policy is going to make Muslims all around the world furious and mad at the United States. And in a bizarre way, what happened at 9/11 was a consequence of Stalin's evil plan to turn the Muslims against the West. But what also needs to be said is that Stalin couldn't control American foreign policy, and therefore what happened isn't entirely influenced by this weird Stalin's decision to help Israel, but partially it is. And people often forget that the Soviets were the ones that prevented the annihilation of Israel in the early days in 1948, when the war of 1948 was fought between Arabs and Israel. Yeah, therefore the United States only later started helping Israel, and there were two primary reasons for that. Reason number one, many Christians, the evangelicals, believed that the United States, as a Christian nation, has a mission of restoring the land of Israel, because it was said in the Old Testament that the land of the Jews will be restored, and in the eyes of many influential evangelicals and Jews in the United States, therefore the United States had a duty of fulfilling this Old Testament prophecy. And the other reason was way more pragmatical. Nixon administration and Carter administration both agreed that by helping Israel during the Yom Kippur War, that they were going to create a wedge, or a split, one might say, between Egypt and Syria. Because let us not forget that Egypt was the first Arab nation and the first Muslim nation also that recognized Israel. They did so in order to get their territory back that was conquered by Israel, and in that way the United States in late 1970s managed to cause a split between the Arab allies of the Soviet Union, and that's why they helped Israel quite heavily during the Yom Kippur War. And somehow Stalin was actually able to predict all of this happening in one way or another. So while he was crazy in many aspects, he actually was quite a brilliant politician in many ways. I'm talking about Stalin, one of the biggest psychopaths of the 20th century, but also one of the I would actually say people with the greatest capacity to predict what was going to happen in the future. Also, Stalin also famously said, "We have 10 years to prepare for a giant war," precisely 10 years before Hitler attacked. Okay, let us move on to fact number 2. The last genocide that happened in Europe was actually a genocide of Muslims done by the Serbian Christians in Bosnia. So let us present a short summary of what happened. When the Ottomans conquered Bosnia in the 15th century, Christians were oppressed, especially Serbian Christians. And there was a short period in which the Austro-Hungary conquered Bosnia, and there was a relative religious tolerance between Serbs and Muslims under the Habsburg rule. But after World War I, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia actually conquered Bosnia, and it was a nation with a Serbian king. And the Serbian king and the Serbian elites decided to oppress Muslims in this new kingdom and take their land from them and give the best land to the Serbs, which is why when Hitler conquered Yugoslavia and formed the independent state of Croatia, the fascist state of Croatia, many Muslims joined the Croatian Catholic fascists in killing the Serbs. Here you can see the notorious image of Croatian fascist dictator Ante Pavelić shaking hands with Hitler. And after the fall of fascism, Tito establishes a communist dictatorship in which nationalism and ethnic tensions are brutally suppressed by this idealistic motto of brotherhood and unity. And after the fall of communism, old ethnic tensions and blood vengeance are restored. And what happens in Bosnia is one of the most horrible genocides that happened after World War II, or at least in Europe. In just a couple of days, 10,000 Muslim men are gathered and killed by the Serbian military, and Radovan Karadzic, a Serbian general that was in charge of that project, claimed that he is avenging what was done to the Serbs during the Ottomans, as well as what the Muslim fascists did to the Serbs. So he was a psychopath that believed in collective vengeance and didn't care about individual rights, obviously. So yeah, here we can see the Serbian military showing the three fingers, a symbol of Serbian nationalists that stands for the Holy Trinity. Let us return to the days of the glorious past of the Islamic civilization. The golden age of the Islamic civilization was one of the most prosperous periods during the medieval times, and Islamic civilization was one of the most developed in the world at that time. I'm talking about the early 13th century. And it is a period that lasted, roughly speaking, from 9th century up until the mid 13th century. That is until the Mongols showed up. And the Mongols were a relatively tolerant bunch. They allowed religious freedoms in their empire, and they even organized debates between Christians, Muslims and Buddhists, but they had a very strict policy, and the policy is as follows. If you don't rebel against us, you just have to pay tribute to the great Khan. You can even pray to your gods for the success of our great Khan. In fact, we would like you to do so, but if you rebel, then we will annihilate you. And the Mongols asked the Baghdad Caliph to surrender, and the Baghdad Caliph refused, and the great Mongol Khan replied with a notorious line, then you shall fall miserably into the jaws of a lion. And the entire Baghdad Caliphate is pillaged, and the house of Hikmah is destroyed. The Muslim cavalry is ambushed and destroyed by the Mongols, and after that soon the city fell, and all the treasures of Baghdad were pillaged, and men were slaughtered. Some historians even say in the millions. Some historians even speak of a mountain of heads of 2 million Muslims being slaughtered after the Mongol conquest. And I'm not sure if the figure of 2 million is correct, but what is true is that the Islamic civilization never actually fully recovered from the slaughter that was done by the Mongols. And now let us jump to the 16th century. So most of you probably don't see Ottoman Empire as a great naval power. You probably think, when you hear the Ottoman Empire, you probably think of the land armies of the Ottoman Empire. But up until the late 16th century, the Ottoman Empire actually controlled the Mediterranean. They were the dominant force on the Mediterranean Sea. But then the Battle of Lepanto, or the Battle of Lepanto, happens in 1571. Their fleet is annihilated by the Christian alliance. And yeah, they are ambushed and their fleet is destroyed. And that famous battle of Lepanto ended the Ottoman dominance in the Mediterranean. And most historians agree that the Ottomans were able very quickly to build a new fleet, but still they never managed to control the western part of the Mediterranean after the battle. And perhaps precisely because of this battle they were never able to colonize America, because they couldn't pass through the western part of the Mediterranean Sea. And it was also, what needs to be said, this battle was also a great psychological victory for the Christians, because in 100 years the Ottomans previously hadn't lost a single great naval battle. And still we can see in Sicily there is a monument to the great Christian leader that defeated the Ottomans at Lepanto, at the Battle of Lepanto. One of the very important battles that is probably not that famous among average people. And finally, I want to say something about the Balkan Wars. And I'm referring to the wars that happened directly before World War I in Europe. Small Christian nations decided it is time to free their Christian brethren from the Ottoman oppression, or at least that is how the conflict is described in Bulgarian and Serbian propaganda. The Bulgarians even call the event the Last Crusade. And I'm referring to the wars that happened in 1912 and 1913. Here you can see a map of Europe just before the First Balkan War, and here you can see Europe after the First Balkan War. So the Ottoman Empire lost quite a lot of land. So Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro and Greece were able to destroy this Islamic giant on the battlefield. And how were these small nations able to do it? Well, at the time there was a cholera pandemic in the Ottoman Empire that crippled a part of their military, and also the Ottoman Empire was engaged in a fight for Libya with Italy, and there was an Albanian revolt against the Ottomans, and the Balkan nations realized that now it is time to avenge their ancestors and return the territories that once long ago in the Middle Ages used to belong to them before the Ottomans conquered them. And after the First Balkan War, in which the Ottomans are annihilated and they lose quite a lot of their territory, well, after that the small Christian nations realized that actually they are not happy with Bulgaria getting a huge piece of the pie, and that's why pretty much all countries, Serbia and Greece and the Ottoman Empire, decide to attack Bulgaria at the same time and take parts of Bulgarian territory. Just compare Bulgaria on this map with Bulgaria on this map after the Second Balkan War. But the Balkan Wars definitely showed that the Ottoman Empire was a paper tiger, that they were kind of a dead man on the Bosporus, as they were called before World War I. And what they also showed is that this idea of brotherhood between Christians was also a myth because of the backstabbing melodrama that followed right after the First Balkan War. The Christians went to war with each other right after they defeated the Ottomans, not to mention that for many Christians they didn't experience better life in their new homeland, especially if we are talking about Albanians that got conquered by the Serbs on Kosovo. And even today the issue of Kosovo is not resolved entirely, but yeah, all of this geopolitical chaos around Kosovo actually starts in 1913, when the Serbian kingdom conquers Kosovo from Albania right after the Second Balkan War. And what needs to be said is that both Serbian and Bulgarian conquests weren't just motivated by this noble notion of liberating the Christians. They also had pretty strong imperial ambitions of their own. And here you can see the Serbian Empire of the Emperor Dusan from the 14th century, and Serbian ultra-nationalists still today claim they want to restore the Empire of Dusan. And the last attempt at this mad megalomaniac project was actually undertaken by Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian dictator, in the 90s, although he, instead of attacking Greece, actually went and attacked Croatia and Bosnia. But the basic idea is the same, that Serbia actually needs to be much bigger than it is. And most countries have these megalomaniac dreams of restoring their empires at point at which they were the largest in history. The Croatian fascists will also talk about Croatia from the 10th century, when Croatia controlled the entirety of Bosnia. And yeah, the Balkan Wars are one of the reasons for the First World War. They actually managed to trigger the already pre-existing tensions between Serbia and Austro-Hungary into escalating and plunging Europe into the chaos and hell of World War I. So that's all for this video, and see you in the next one.